Welcome back to the Soulrocker podcast, and I am your host, Vanessa Delgado. Now, in today's episode, I want to talk about reparenting your inner child. Now, if you have been following me on Instagram, then you might already be familiar with this, and I hope I'm not annoying anyone with this, but honestly, it's just something that I'm really, really passionate about sharing and about how this is so helpful and how this can look like for us. So essentially, everyone has an inner child, and most of us feel it throughout our lives. I think anyone could really relate to the fact that sometimes we think of it and maybe we feel like it only shows up when we are with our friends, and maybe you're in your 30s or 40s or even 50s, and you're having this, boys or girls night out or even day. But the thing is not everyone associates childhood with playfulness and fun, or even the fact that it often shows to us through our emotions and if you ever experience neglect, trauma, or any other emotional pain in your childhood, even in the smallest ways, you may have buried this pain deep to hide and protect yourself, both your present self and the child that you once were. Hiding pain and suppressing it doesn't actually heal it and make it go away. Instead, it often surfaces in our adult life, showing up as distress in personal relationships or difficulty meeting, your own needs. And working to heal your inner child can help you address some of these issues. And when I first became aware of reparenting the inner child, it was when I came across this book by this author named John Bradshaw. And in his books, specifically Healing the Shame That Binds You, which is the first book that I read, and then it's where I learned so much. He goes into so much depth. It is incredible. And then he also gives so many different techniques and tips on how you can heal it. So reading that book really got me so interested that I ended up reading his other book called Homecoming. And he actually has a couple other ones that I have to read, but they kind of go hand in hand with each other, which later became actually a recommendation from my first therapist when I first started. And that book was essentially the introduction to inner child healing for me. And, I've continued to apply those techniques ever since. And I've been doing this for about 4 years. And I essentially started, I just came across the book on my own shortly after, right before I started therapy, actually. Many of us were emotionally abandoned, even having the best parents. I think people sometimes don't think of it because emotional neglect and emotional trauma is overlooked because people often only associate trauma and neglect with physical abuse, verbal abuse, or actual neglecting, you didn't get fed properly or you were left alone often, things of that nature, which obviously are super terrible. But I think there's something about the emotional aspect of the emotional neglect and the trauma that really also kind of have a very specific way of abuse, in a sense, that affects us so, in an intense way that we don't even see it, which is even scarier because, the other things are they're more noticeable. It's something that obviously it's super painful, but it's something that it's not you see it much easier. And so this is where emotional maturity comes from. And this is where oftentimes if we were emotionally neglected, then we don't have the capacity to learn how to be emotional mature and to have because basically that's like meeting the needs for love, recognition, praise, and other types of emotional support that go unmet in childhood. And if you don't have that, then most likely you will go through this. You'll, like, basically as an adult, you'll be an adult, like, but your emotions will be very immature. And trauma, that's a result of what happens that goes into your adult life. And by learning to nurture your inner child, you can validate these needs and learn to express your emotions in healthy ways and increase self-compassion and self-love towards yourself and towards other people. Because you have the ability to listen to what your inner child has to say, and you're connected to that part. And after opening the door to a connection with your inner child, it's important to listen to the feelings that enter, because really that's what really helps us determine what is it that, again, that we need. And these feelings often come up in situations that trigger strong emotions, discomfort, or old wounds. And you might notice this like in a way that it comes off of from anger over unmet needs, abandonment or rejection, insecurity, vulnerability, guilt or shame, and also anxiety. So in the book, one of the recommendations in order to connect to your inner child that essentially will help heal your inner child is to open a dialogue and start the healing, is to like open up a dialogue to start the healing process by writing a letter to your inner child. And essentially it's a huge way to start off by, you can access like specific memories if you want, or you can just do something quite basic. Like it's not about like overthinking it. It's more about, connecting. Like you could even connect in a way, instead of just saying like, hey, what's up? How are you feeling? Type of thing. You can like, so basically what happens is you would take your dominant hand. And in my case, I'm right-handed. And, you could do whatever feels comfortable to you. And you could be, you could say something like, dear, little me, or dear little whatever your name is. And then if you want, like, you're the one that's driving this, and you could go, you can say like, hey, how are you feeling today? What's on your mind? Or you can even do something like, something that you feel like could really get them to express themselves. Like for me, it would be something like, how is it growing up with mom? What are the types of things that you often felt? Or maybe even like insert a specific like memory or situation that maybe they can allow themselves to express, that maybe you feel like you never got to do that. And so you would do that and then say like, I'm here, let me know what you think, what you're feeling, just kind of like provide that like support. And then you would take your non-dominant hand. So for me, it obviously would be my left hand, and you would write back. And in most cases, you could say something like, you'd probably start it off with like, dear older me, or whatever. And then the craziest thing, like there's a scientific aspect to this, but I'm not really aware of it. But if you did the research, you could probably find it. But essentially there is scientific, like there's like a scientific proof that like something within our minds and our bodies get connected. And so it's so weird how by doing that, like you will literally see how your response to your little self will respond in like a way that an actual child would. Because oftentimes you will see the message that's being sent back with like, grammar errors. There will be also like incomplete sentences. You'll see all sorts of stuff, just like you would a child. Like it's honestly bizarre, and it sounds like weird, and sketch, but like it's actually like so therapeutic. Another way that you could tap into your inner child is through like all the joys. So even though some of us had, probably had many bad experiences that caused stress and trauma, or, whatever it was, we most likely also had a lot of good times too, mixed in. And connecting and doing things that we did that we enjoyed, it can be super helpful. Usually like books that you read, shows or movies, music, hobbies and activities, eating certain foods, playing certain games, even playing with like kids. Obviously, like if you have any kids in your family, whether it's like nieces, nephews, or cousins, it's super helpful to like go and play with them. And obviously I wouldn't recommend you going to like a park and playing with like some random strangers, because that would obviously seem sketch, but you guys get what I'm saying. Like there's so many different things. And but so something that I like to mention too is like, just like anything, like when you jump onto something like wanting to heal your inner child or wanting to do like self-development work, it's kind of like when you jump on a diet, and oftentimes like it's hard to stick to something, right? And so like it's the same thing that happens when it comes to this type of thing, where like sometimes you get on you hop on and like things are going great and you're making progress, but like oftentimes like we can fall off like this bandwagon. So a personal story that I really wanted to share that was really like eye-opening, but because it was an experience that it was new to me, but it was also, I had to do a lot with like this whole topic and theme. And essentially it was, so recently I started seeing my therapist again. And there was a session of which I went in and I just was really stressed out. And she walked me through this technique of essentially connecting to my inner self. Now it was more of a meditation type of technique where it was a lot of like imaginative like meditation. And so first she called me to close my eyes and envision a safe place. And this safe place, she's helped me kind of put it together before. And for me, it's always in nature. And there's this huge waterfall. Like it's so pretty. And there's nice trees around, just kind of surrounding it. So it's kind of like in this secluded area, and like on one side of like across from where this like waterfall cascade is, there's a bunch of flowers. And I always picture this nice warm sun just kind of beaming right in the middle of the little like pond area that it's at. And so I envisioned myself there. And then she asked me to think of a place that I could have like a meeting. And she's like, I would recommend for you to have basically create like a different place. But if you really want it to be there, then that's fine too. So I envisioned this open white space with like this wide wall that was filled to the top, from the top to the bottom, with flowers, like pink and red flowers. And there was a couple of big comfy chairs that just looked fluffy and aesthetic. And then she asked me to invite different parts of myself to this meeting. And then she later asked me to describe each one. I allowed myself to invite parts of myself that, and it could have been whatever. Like she wasn't expecting anything per se, But it was crazy how I had the people that I had, well, the versions of myself that basically I brought up. So the first two were two versions of my inner child, and they both were about 8 years old. And she asked me, why 8? And I said, because it was an age where I had experienced some painful things, but it wasn't new. So it was stuff that I had already been experiencing. And I said I still held a sense of innocence and childlike energy. And I was also beginning to show more personality, but also realized at that age, like I was realizing that the personality that I was starting to want to be curious about and show was not accepted. And so at that moment, I began to learn what it was to like suppress myself. The one 8-year-old was this courageous, wise, loving, and caring version of me, or she is. And I actually really admire her so much. And there's this like soft, light, forgiving energy to her. The other 8-year-old was essentially what I called the shadow aspect. And she's the one who carries all this anger, pain, shame, and sadness. She feels alone and scared, rejected, and abandoned. Then there's this current version of me who she almost always just gives off this like mannequin poster vibes. Just the version of me who everyone sees. She's the one who takes the feedback of all my other versions and essentially simply does what she is told. She has no voice. She's just the one that wakes up and shows up in life. She's the one that often shows up at work. She's often the one that shows up when you see her at the gym. She's often the one that shows up when you see her out and about shopping or just doing whatever mundane things. And then there's this other current version of me who she has so much on her plate. She's the one who, or at least at the moment, she's the one who is behind closed doors. She's the one who is healing. She's the one who has to worry about her emotions, the responsible things of adulting, the part who does all the hard work. She feels exhausted with trying to reparent the 2 8-year-olds. And she's trying to connect to her higher self. She's trying to do all these things at once. And then there was this version of me that was blurred, because she's the current version of me who's resilient. She sort of captures most of my other versions, and although she struggles, she's courageous and feels confident and quite balanced. She holds all the good versions and qualities of me, and she shares them with others. She uses the sad and the painful parts of herself as fuel. And she was blurred because she's only available when I'm more in a balanced state and not going through so much. When she has the capacity to hold her emotions, and when she feels like she's receiving some of what she gives, whether it's to herself or to other people. Then there is this version of me who's just a little bit older and wiser. And she's more of the mother aspect of me, the more fully integrated part of me. But she was kind of standoffish, or typically is. And she's just trying to hold space for all the other versions, but mostly has these boundaries of this like soft, tough love. She trusts that I can find the way as a younger version she's already experienced, and she knows and fully accepts herself as a whole. When we moved to allowing each one to share their voices and feelings, giving each aspect an opportunity to be seen and heard. So once I got to the point where I recognized each one of them, then I gave each one an opportunity to be seen and to be heard and to share what is it that they were feeling. And any of them that seemed to have, be off, I asked them, what is it that they needed? And so the current version of me admitted to feeling exhausted and unbalanced and needing help. And she said, that's why I'm here today. And then she felt bad because the light 8-year-old was offering her support, of which she felt like she should be doing as the quote unquote parent. The shadow 8-year-old she was the loudest. She was so afraid of being abandoned and becoming irrelevant. And that's something that oftentimes happens more than not. She tries so hard often to be seen, but because all she holds is fear, pain, shame, and never really connects to the light 8-year-old because they are just completely disconnected. And they're disconnected because it's hard for her to see herself as she is, as that light 8-year-old. And so it's like she really just needs that older parent to validate her. My therapist asked, what do you think she needs? And I said, she needs patience and love and care. She needs reassurance, like a lot of it. And she needs comforting words and touch. She needs to feel accepted and validated. And it does have to be from me because there's a sense of me that only she trusts. And this whole experience was making me see that sometimes, or often, especially lately, I have been lacking in connecting to myself, to that shadow self, because she's the one that needs the most attention. And there have been times where I have connected to her, but I did it in a way that it was just kind of like, yeah, what do you need? Yeah, okay, let me know. And it was kind of that vibe. And she feels that, where it's like, I'm just kind of doing this because I feel pressured and just I don't really want to help you right now. And it kind of has that sense of rejection to it. And she really needs that undivided attention and that unconditional love. And when she goes too much time without it, or when something becomes something else from the outside world that reminds her of any of the things that basically validates those fears that she has, or those dark shadow feelings that she has about herself, then it just becomes that doormat state just kind of comes alive again and sort of takes over. And doing this really made me have a sense of there's a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I mean, it literally gave that current version of myself a voice and this ability to just admit that she was feeling overwhelmed. And if she's feeling overwhelmed, then she can't possibly help the shadow self. And if the shadow self had been triggered recently, then it was going to create a whole slew of crazy anxiety and unbalance, between mainly those two. And I felt bad. I felt guilt for not knowing what my current self that was feeling overwhelmed, really not knowing how to handle so many emotions at once, that she even went to that light 8-year-old for some comfort and support. But the crazy thing was that the 8-year-old who was the light side was like, but I'm okay. Like, I'm okay giving that to you too. It's okay. Like, we're all one. And that's the point here, is to feed off of each other, but in a good way, so that like none of us are feeling too much of to this and too little of to that. And it was such a great experience. I came to a lot of other realizations. It was something that like, I'm like, wow, I now know that how exactly to connect and exactly in what way to put this together. And I've caught myself already using this exact technique, where I first go to this, good, happy place, and then from there go to the meeting and bring the versions of myself and just check in. And it's been so helpful for me. And in some cases, I know that not everyone will resonate with this, because, not everyone is good at like imagining things. But one could also, you can use your imagination to bring upon this technique, but in a way that will help and work for you. So if drawing is something that would work better for you, like draw it, like draw like different versions of yourself that you feel like you are, and kind of like have them talk to each other. If you even have like let's just say some of like a guy, for example, I'm thinking sometimes they collect like these like collectible figures. Use those as a representation, as like of what you're feeling and different aspects of yourself, and have them communicate to each other. Or if you feel like you could even do, like a recording or like a video, like if you're into videography or something like that, and, or like even sports, like you use different, like a basketball and like a soccer ball and like your football and like your baseball and you're like your glove, and like, I know that sounds so weird, but like, who the fuck cares? Like, seriously, this is about connecting and seeing things in a different perspective. And because if we really think about it, that's something that we used to do as kids, and that was a huge aspect of being a kid, was using your imagination and talking to yourself. And we lost that within ourselves as we age. And the point is to integrate more of our inner self, that inner child within us, but in a healthy way, so that we can continue to repair the things that was unmet for us, but then also help connect us in a way that we're always gonna basically have that inner child within us. But if we can get to a place where this inner child feels safe and seen and accepted by you as an adult, because we're often beating our own selves up. It's like those words from our parents that we learned, and from other people in our lives as we were growing, we kept their voices kind of like programmed into our mind. I am really curious and interested to see if any of you guys have experienced anything, if you guys ever done anything like this before, or if you plan to maybe try this yourself, and if you're willing to share, like, how was that process for you? I would love to hear about it. You can reach me at Instagram.com/the Soulrocker podcast, and leave a review, a rating, and share if you'd like, if this was